this figure here illustrates a simple state machine diagram for a printer. So because it is a little easier to learn about state machine diagram by using tangible items. So let's start with a few examples of a computer hardware. Let's think of a printer. Okay, so the starting point of a state machine diagram is a black dot, so which is called a pseudo state. So it denotes the start of the state machine behavior for this object. So the first shape after the black dot is the first state of the printer. So in this case, the printer begins with the off state. So this is the first state. Because it's as long as you're not turning the button on, then it is in the off state. So this is the button. So the arrow leaving the off state is called a transition. So remember, the line or the arrow represents the transition from one state to another state. Okay, so it leaves the state of being an off state to make a transition to the on state. So after the transition begins, it runs to completion by taking the new object to a new state. So we call that the destination state. So a transition begins with an arrow from the origin state. So this is the state prior to the transition to a destination state, and it is labeled with a string to describe the components of the transition. So the label okay. So again, to define some terminology, the origin state is the original state of an object before it begins a transition. Destination state, it is the state to which an object moves from after completing a transition. And a pseudo-state, it is the starting point in a state machine diagram denoted by a black circle. So going back to our example, we say that after as we transition to another state, so there should be a label that describe the components of the transition. So the transition label consists of the following syntax with three components: the transition names and open close parentheses. Inside that are the parameters, the guard condition, and the action expression. So in this figure, the transition name is on button push. So this is the transition name. The transition is like a trigger that fires or an event that occurs. Remember our printer. So when you click this button, the on button, so when the on button is pushed, so that's when the on state will happen. So the next part of the statement is the guard condition. So inside this symbol. Okay, so since there are no parameters, that are being sent to the printer. So the parentheses are left off, so we didn't include any parentheses here in the parameters here. And next is the guard condition here, which is safety, cover, close. So for the transition to fire, the guard must be true. The condition must be true. Meaning to say that the safety cover is closed, so this must be true for you to push the button. And then the backslash divides the firing mechanism from the actions or processes. So this is the action expression. In this case, run, start up. So action expressions indicate some process that must occur before the transition is completed. So the startup should be run first. It should run first. And so that the object arrives in the destination state. So in this case, the printer will run a startup procedure before it goes into the on state. So the on button should be pushed first. The safety cover is so this condition is true, and then the printer will, as the button is pushed, the printer will run a startup. So we can say that it has arrived to the destination state, which is the on state. So to give a definition to our terminology that I hope you'll remember, so the first term is the transition name. So this is the trigger or event that causes the transition to fire. Parameters, so any parameters that need to be passed to the object from the triggering object. Action expression, these are some activity that must be completed as part of the transition. And guard condition, this is a true or false test to see whether a transition can fire.